Okay, another week means more drama around the Pittsburgh Steelers. It is another Steelers Monday edition here of Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti. Steelers, week 1 felt like a loss, while week 2 was a loss. The Steelers lose to the Kansas City Chiefs 42-37 in a game that became back and forth, started off dominating by the Kansas City Chiefs. Steelers pulled off what almost was going to be a record-setting comeback in franchise history, and then ended up falling to the Chiefs. The Chiefs now 2-0, and Pittsburgh 1-1. So they kissed their sister in week 1, and then in week 2, it gets even worse. A lot to talk about here. Steelers Monday. I am joined alongside Chris Mueller. He formerly covered the Pittsburgh Steelers with the Beaver County Times and now does some work with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris, first off, thanks for joining me. How are you doing on this Steelers Monday morning?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I mean, obviously the Steelers aren't. Right. Steelers Nation isn't doing so well, but there's a lot, obviously, you can take from that game. Not good. It's on the defensive side of the ball. So.
Well, we're going to get there in a moment, and that's I was going to ask you now to lead things off to unpack this as quick as we can here. The Steelers, obviously, when you allow 42 points and there was tons of miscues and they get down 21-0 early, the defense is going to get discussed. So you mentioned it, and that's where we will hit right off the bat. Yeah. What went wrong with this defense? Is it as bad as you expected it to be? I mean, the defense was an issue last year. Obviously, that's part of why they got eliminated in the playoffs. They didn't do much to fix it, but this almost seemed like the perfect storm if it couldn't get much worse.
Well, it was just sloppy all around. It just looked like there were a lot of miscommunication early on. I mean, Pat Mahomes, when he throws for 6 touchdowns, although he was really accurate and really kind of showed his potential and why Andy Reid spent a first-round pick on him. I mean, still, like, Cam Sutton was constantly out of place. It felt like really they just weren't prepared, and that ultimately comes down to coaching and Keith Butler. And it's just interesting how the Steelers, they did all these things in the offseason to kind of tweak the defense, whether it was bringing some new, secondary assistant coach Tom Bradley. They switched Bud Dupree and Watt. They flip-flopped them and kind of, but they kept Keith Butler. And in my opinion, it maybe if they were going to get rid of one assistant, before Todd Haley, they should have looked at defense.
Yeah, Todd Haley became the scapegoat, even though the team did eventually click on all cylinders offensively and score points. There was a lot of dissension there, and that firing might have been more than even just what happened on the field. But the Butler situation, he's getting a lot more rope than a lot of the other assistant coaches have got through the Tomlin era, certainly in comparison to Todd Haley. The fan base really has almost left him alone, even when they criticize the defense. It's very bizarre. I'm not sure what's around Butler that allows him to kind of get away with murder like that, but what could you look ahead to the season in terms of, do you see any glimpses of possibilities for improvement? They don't really have the superstars they've used to have. They didn't make many changes in the offseason, but is there anything that can be done? Do you have any reason to have optimism that this can at least get corrected to a reasonable fashion and they can resurrect the season?
I mean, it's only week 2. There's no that's the good thing. That's the only thing you can really take comfort in right now, is that it's so early on that there's so much time for improvement. I mean, they've got some young guys. I just don't think they're that talented. I mean, in the secondary, I don't think, outside of Artie Burns, really, we saw what the loss of Joe Hayden is really going to do to this secondary. So, I mean, I think they can improve upon it. I think they just need to be more sharp as a whole. That comes down to Tomlin. That comes down to Butler and preparation. And Joey Porter, like, look how many first-round picks he has, at his position group. And for some reason, like, he can't really get production out of them. If you're asking improvement-wise, I think so. But it's going to go all around.
Yeah, and that's something that Joey Porter hasn't really felt much criticism either there, as we almost lost Roddy Piper there for a second. He's upset about Steelers Monday as well. You mentioned the defense, though, and it is early in the season. It's only week 2, although historically in the NFL, when you're 0-2, and they didn't have 2 losses, they have 1, but when you're 0-2, it's not too often do you see a postseason appearance. Now, this also leads us into immediately Monday Night Football, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's the next week, and That's where I'm going to get to in a second, because if you look at this stat here, if you can, the viewers are going to see this on the screen, but if you just peer your eyes over and look at Patrick Mahomes, Ryan Fitzgerald just became the two of the only 3 quarterbacks in NFL history to throw at least 4 touchdowns in each of the first 2 games in a season. And also, when you look like this, and you basically become the NFL's new Conor McGregor, that's also going to be kind of intimidating. So in terms of, it's not going to get much easier, and there are weapons with Kansas City. There was Kelsey, et cetera, to deal with, but there's even Deshaun Jackson, who's turned it back up a notch for Tampa Bay. So it's going to be more of a problem. Do you see that potential Tampa Bay matchup being anything the Steelers could have an easier time with, or it's a different offense?
No, I mean, it's not going to be easy. No, in the NFL, no, week to week. Nothing's easy, especially on Monday Night Football. You're playing a Tampa Bay team that's playing inspired football. They just beat the Super Bowl champions. I'm a Philly guy, so I tuned into that. And I mean, Fitzpatrick, he's been lighting it up, and it's come out of nowhere. And I mean, he took Jameis's job. What are you going to do? You can't, when Jameis comes, you can't bench him. So I mean, this is
Jameis is going to sit down with all the controversy he's dealt with.
Right. This is the perfect opportunity, though, for the Steelers defense, if they aren't as bad as what we saw yesterday, to kind of take a step forward and be like, just look, that was a one-time thing. That's not going to be the case going forward. So I think really it's an important week in terms of that.
Yeah, it definitely is, to say the least. Now, we get our little nameplate there. Once again, Pittsburgh Sports Live. This is Steelers Monday, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Chris Mueller, Mike Asti here with Pittsburgh Sports Live. You can find us all through the social media. You can find us mainly on our YouTube channel. You're going to see right there, Pittsburgh Sports Live on the YouTube channel. You can also find us on Twitter at Pittsburgh Sports Live, and my personal Twitter at MikeAusti11 will have all this content. But now, stepping a page off the offense, or off the defense for a second, and to the offense, because 37 points, the offense put up points. Big Ben had his numbers. He played a great game as it morphed into that. His completion percentage, yards, touchdowns were there for him. He had 3 different receivers with touchdown receptions. However, not everybody enjoyed the offensive performance of the Pittsburgh Steelers, namely the offensive coordinator after the game, by all accounts. And I wasn't at this game covering it. I'm going to be actually in a couple weeks, but I covered them all through last season. You've been in that locker room, and any colleagues I've spoken to, Antonio Brown pretty much refused to speak to the media.
Yeah, he left.
He left and didn't talk to the media at all. And I was at some games last year at the end of the season, especially after playoff losses or the tough Patriots game, where he would even look at us and say, I'm going to take a really long time to change my clothes, and I'm going to make you guys stand here for 40 minutes until he actually says anything. He's done that before, but I didn't experience last year where he didn't speak to us at all. He does that after week 2. It's a loss. He doesn't speak to the media. He has that outburst. What do you make of this?
Are you surprised?
I'm not surprised.
When we're talking about AB.
Well, I'm not surprised at all.
Is it a good look? No, not a good look.
I guess my question then could be, because neither one of us was surprised, and we've dealt with this before, what should happen? It's not going on, but should there be any more clamps on him? Should Tomlin do anything? I mean, he clearly has free reign, and he's obviously one of the best receivers in football, and you're not going to bench somebody like that. But what can be done? He spent the offseason saying that the narrative against him is wrong and is unfair. He doesn't speak to the media, flips out when the offense does put up numbers despite losing. What can be done? Where do we go from here with AB?
You talk to him internally. I mean, really, I'm sure these conversations have happened before. I mean, look, after threatening, to assault a reporter over a story, what do you think? Mike didn't say something to him then. I mean, I just think it's like.
You mean the Ed Bouchette thing?
No, the Jesse Washington thing.
Oh, before that, that's valid too. Because I was going to say after the Ed Bouchette thing, Tomlin at least told us in media that he wasn't aware of it, and that was a week after it happened.
He was aware.
No, I know he was aware, but I mean,
he's saying, "Oh, don't ask me about social media with this undefeated story." I mean, look, it's what you get. You get the All-Pro receiver, you get the best receiver in the game, but then unfortunately, this comes along with it. I don't know. Do you bench him? No, I don't think you.
No,
really, I don't think that's really should be the biggest of your concern. I mean, we've seen AB.
If you were 2-0, would that be a different question?
Probably not. No, I don't think. I don't know. I wouldn't bench him. This isn't the first time AB has flipped out on the sideline about not getting passes. We don't know what he was yelling about. I've seen reports that everyone thinks it was at Randy when it could have been about the wide receivers coach. It could have been. We don't really know. But
sure.
I mean, all I'm saying, I guess this is just like, this is AB. This is what you're gonna get, and really, it's an unfortunate. It's not great, but this just falls into the whole. Tomlin, this has always been the case with his kind of, treating his stars a little bit different.
Does that need adjusted? Is Tomlin too loose with star players? Because obviously you're going to have there's been an NFL history of Ocho Cinco, T.O., where Randy Moss, Hall of Fame superstar receivers have treated coordinators and coaches like this before on sidelines. It's not new. He's a diva elite receiver. This is kind of what you get. I hear that. But this isn't just the only guy that you've had to deal with these problems. This is now, when you show up to training camp in a helicopter, it's funny. I love it. I'm not going to hate on it at all. But then when you see these outbursts, wow, there's 37 points on the board. It wasn't like he was upset at the defense for letting his team down.
It was there. What point of the game was it? It was kind of early on.
It was. Yeah, it was. It wasn't. I think the offense was clicking. There were certainly points on the board. It wasn't fourth quarter, but it might have been second half, early second half, or else late first half.
Yeah. So honestly. I don't see anything happening at all. It's annoying. But they've got bigger problems to worry about right now.
Yeah, no, there absolutely are, and I'm sure that's where the attention's going to be turned, at least on the field for Mike Tomlin. He's going to hit it all, and then tell us that he's we're causing all these problems.
We're going to handle it internally.
We're going to handle it internally. Yeah. I know his answers. This was just not something you'd want to see in this game. Now, at this point in the year, after everything we've dealt with AB to this point, it's just something you got to bring up when it's so prominent.
It's not good leadership, for some of the younger guys. You got Juju.
Do you expect Ben to pull him aside as well, separate from the internal handling of Tomlin?
Probably not. No.
Do you expect any comments from Ben subtly or none? Because we've heard that from Ben.
About AB, no.
He'll get asked on his radio show.
And probably just, AB's a fiery guy. The typical thing he always says, fiery. He's a competitive guy. He needs to, maybe needs to pipe it down a little bit. But the same. Yeah,
because he picks his spots. There's once a year where he will kind of jab somebody if he feels like it's necessary.
And I think he's about to go jab maybe these coaches. I don't think it's gonna, I know. Best believe, the passive aggression.
Right, because there is passive aggressiveness. Right, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah,
of course. It's probably going to get sent in the direction of MT or even maybe the defensive coordinator. Like, hey, look, I'm throwing a ball 60 times a game. 35 times in the first half with a sore elbow. Maybe you should get some defense behind me.
Right, when you're down 21-0, 35 pass attempts in the first half.
That was interesting. Just like all week we heard about his sore elbow, and then 35 pass attempts in 2 quarters. That's pretty nuts. That's surprising.
And I never expected him not to play in the game all week when we were hearing about the elbow. You kind of always hear that about because Aaron Rodgers even played. You always hear about that. I never figured Ben wouldn't play.
But
the official announcement wasn't until Sunday. Everyone kind of just figured immediately he's going to play, but it wasn't officially said until Sunday.
Yeah.
But it is odd that he threw that many pass attempts with the sore elbow, unless it wasn't that big of a deal, or
it probably was just Ben being dramatic.
It's either Ben being dramatic or there was some risking of himself to try to get this win because they realized that was the only way to do it with how the game was unfolding. Because I don't think anybody within the Steelers thought 21-0 in what it felt like blink of an eye.
No,
So I don't think anyone expected that either.
Mahomes had 3 touchdowns on his first 11 passes or something, which is inexcusable.
Yeah, and you not only what Mahomes did, and we saw the numbers of Mahomes and the record-setting performance he had and the 6 touchdowns and how great he had in only his second game. And it's kind of odd because in the past, young quarterbacks would hate playing a Steelers defense.
Well, yeah.
And this was basically the tissue paper thin defense from what he had to deal with. But not only that, when you look at what's going on, you see some stats there for Ben. But when you really look at what the defense had problems with, it's Kelsey in terms of Kelsey really dominated. There was no one they could really put on him. I was trying to look for memes to throw up there on Twitter during the game because it was almost a transformer walking with just people falling off of him and just laying beneath him. It was a giant walking through the village. Really, is kind of what it felt like. That leads when you think about it. That's almost gave me a foreshadowing feeling to Gronk And those type of tight ends and those type of big body receivers, that's almost really where the defense should be focused on, because anybody with some size.
Well, Kelsey, he's a premier I'd say top 3, top 5 tight end in the league. And he even said after the game, he was asked about his touchdowns, and he was like, I was wide open on both of them. That's the first thing he said. Yeah, well, I was, kind of just, and it was obviously a subtle shot. He isn't a fan of the Steelers after the playoff losses, the past, over the years. So, but that's the first thing he said, because he literally, Mahomes was throwing to wide open guys, for a lot of those touchdowns.
He was, and basically Kelsey was just manhandling guys down the field, and then he ended up being wide open for the touchdowns. I don't know what that was, either blown coverage, the Steelers were getting exhausted from dealing with him midway through the field. I don't know, but yeah, Kelsey was somebody certainly to keep an eye on in terms of that type of player. Is what has really given the Steelers defense fit for the last several years. Even looking, you want to go to a giant through a village. That was Gronk last year.
Right.
So that was already Kelsey, and that's most likely going to be Gronk again if he's healthy. Now we mentioned on AB, and AB is a superstar diva who is there and is playing well. We haven't talked about this. I did bring it up on my show last week, and it's something that's kind of been quieted this week. The only fortunate thing about the AB flip out, I don't know if he was doing his boy a solid and kind of taking over some attention from the on the field to him off the field, but Le'Veon Bell's still not there. Week 1, no. Week 2, no. He's missing game checks, but he's making his statement. The guaranteed money being floated around to Todd Gurley, etc. He wants his. He had his guaranteed money offer, even though the years and dollar per year were there. It wasn't there guaranteed wise.
Right.
When do you expect Le'Veon Bell to show up? Do you think he's going to drag this all the way to Week 11, which he could possibly do? And do you see that hypothetically, if the Steelers would lose to Tampa or this would get further out of hand, that Tomlin has told us they're going to only deal with players that are there. They have not had contact with Bell, and they're not going to make contact with him. They're going to wait for him.
Right.
Will that change if they go 0-4? Will they call him on the phone and say, now we kind of want you to not have an embarrassing season?
Kevin Colbert, yeah. I think at some point maybe you have to at least reach out to the
agent. Bite the bullet almost.
I think they, privately, they're probably still in talk with the agent, or at least
could be
not in touch. Like, I'd say, like, they're not calling him every week, hey, what's the deal? But like they kind of have a general understanding of what that side is thinking. I don't think Le'Veon's gonna carry it out until Week 11. I don't know if that's like in his best interest in terms of his long-term health, but if he wants a big contract next year from another team, he needs to put some work on tape. I still think, like, he is the best back in the league, but if you take like that long time off, like, I just feel like it's gonna be a little bit of a turnoff to other teams if you're putting yourself first that much. So I can see him maybe coming back Week 5, Week 6. I'd say is probably realistic. I don't think it's going to be this week or next week. I think he's trying to make a point, and he knows. At the same time, now that the Steelers are 1-1,
right?
If Le'Veon was here, they would be riding him. They would literally giving him the ball 35 times, and I think he knows that as soon as he comes back, they're not gonna throw it 60 times anymore. So maybe he is gonna be more reluctant to stay away until he really has to come back.
Yeah, and I don't think he minds the 0-1 record while he's not there either. James Conner filled in mightily in Week 1. He played well, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have a critical fumble that led to what was not a win. It was a tie in Week 1. He wasn't really able to get going in Week 2, and there was even questions about whether or not he was injured.
Right.
Was Le'Veon Bell, his absence felt more in Week 2?
For sure. It's going to be felt regardless. For as good as James Conner has been and kind of his story, you can't replace Le'Veon. You can't replace him from the receiving aspect, from the blocking aspect. That's what goes unnoticed a lot. He's the best running back overall, but he's a blocker. Ben always talks about it all the time.
Yeah,
too,
that's not the stereotype around him. Yeah,
he can step up into the hole and meet any linebacker, and really that has been instrumental in some of the sack numbers the Steelers have put, or at least sacks allowed. They've been pretty good over the last few years. A lot of that had to do with their offensive line, the money they put in, but also Le'Veon. So you could feel the loss. I mean, obviously you always are. But James Conner, he has done some good things, I think, too.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of flack for this, too, on my show and even on other outlets when this was brought up, that James Conner is a great feel-good story and everyone's going to root for him whether you like Pitt or not. I mean, how do you not root for that story? They can make a movie out of it someday if there's NFL success. But I think a lot of the predictions and a lot of you saw through the preseason of, don't worry about Le'Veon, he's going to be a beast, or even these man on the street interviews that friends of ours in TV News do with random fans saying, oh, no big deal, we don't need Le'Veon. I think a lot of that is hoping that James Conner is going to have this tremendous success rather than it actually is going to occur. He could have a decent season, but his best year is probably never going to be the best year for Le'Veon Bell. Mm-hmm. And even if Conner does well, you're going to want more than just him. Ridley is a question mark. Usually you need a couple backs to rely on. It'd be a much better system with Bell and Conner, and Conner being more of a complementary back. And he can get his touchdowns and some yards, and he's done a little bit as a receiver now. But you just can't replace Le'Veon Bell. And he's probably gone after this season, but it's not like even next year when he's gone and Conner probably is the number one guy that you're going to sit there and say, we don't miss Bell at all.
Or no, and I think they'll do more.
And somebody else might be brought in.
Exactly.
Yeah,
they're going to bring someone else. But, I mean, maybe that Conner now at this point has shown them enough that when Le'Veon does come back, he doesn't need to get 30 touches, and maybe they split it more evenly.
And maybe that's a compromise with Bell.
Because he doesn't want to. James Conner has earned it.
He has earned it, yeah.
So maybe that'll help, or maybe in their communications with, I don't really know how it goes, but if they do say to Le'Veon, like, look, James has done his thing, he's earned it. You've seen what we've seen. He's a part of our offense when you come back. He was the one who was there in August in Latrobe staying in dorms. He's been doing everything for the team while you've been, in nightclubs.
Yeah, he was in a nightclub in Miami. I opened up last
TMZ.
week. Yeah.
Yes. It's just, it blows my mind.
I might even still have that, actually.
I understand the NFL is a business first and that players need to look after themselves first and foremost. And I completely agree. And with Le'Veon holding out camp, okay, that's one thing. But to drag it like this late, I don't know. Just something strikes me the wrong way about just, letting your teammates down like that.
Well, the teammates, they kind of turned on him once it went to missing games. They claimed they felt lied to because he was going to drag it as long as possible, but wasn't going to miss games. He's now missed games. Now, my only argument with the teammates, and I've said this too and got flack for it doesn't appear so much as he's lying because I wasn't surprised by him missing games. I mean, he subtly made these comments on Twitter. If you follow him on Twitter, are you really shocked that he put it to this far?
Yeah, I mean, I still am, just because, it's one thing to say it and another thing to do it. And when was the last time we've seen a player sit out for 6 weeks because of a contract thing, to start the year?
I mean, this is Emmitt Smith comparable in the early 90s with the Cowboys dynasty. I think he went to week 4, and then Jimmy Johnson called him, and they came back and won a Super Bowl or something like that.
This doesn't happen like this. Yeah. So, and it's like all of his teammates, Pouncey, the offensive line, either they didn't comment on it or they were positive and they supported Bell through camp. They did the same thing last year when he did this, and it was like, and then once the point where they realized he's not going to be out there when we go, toe to toe with the Browns when things start getting real. I think that's to the point where it kind of rubbed them, it turned them sour. And, I really don't blame them either.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame them if they felt lied to, and we don't know what he was telling them internally on private text messages either. I'm not too shocked by it. I do think we potentially got to this point. If it wasn't going to be missing games initially, he might have started to want to miss games when Todd Gurley got $44 million guaranteed, when David Johnson got $39 million guaranteed, I believe it was, and the Steelers offer, it was 5 years, it was a decent amount of money per year, but it was $10 million guaranteed. And that's really the drum to beat on because I know they couldn't change that offer once the Gurley contract was provided. That was too late in the offseason. They weren't allowed to change the deal. They can't give him a new contract offer right now. But I think once he saw that, it wasn't just quarterbacks, it wasn't just defensive players, it was running backs getting a lot of guaranteed money. I think that he felt really insulted, and no longer were the Steelers in his mind giving him a fair offer, that he just wanted more money. I think he then thought the contract offer wasn't fair. Whether it's true or not, I think that's kind of reading his mind, that he might have been insulted by some of those offers, and it led us here to him missing games.
You sign the tag, and then you bank the money, or that he's the highest paid. You bank them, and then do it again next year.
And he's going to have to eventually do that. He's not going to make. He's missing game checks.
Yeah, and it's just, and then it's like, look, are you still trying to win a Super Bowl at all, or is this just all about $15 million guaranteed over $10 million guaranteed. Like, do you have any desire to help to kind of do what it's just, and I think we're finding out a lot about Le'Veon the person.
We're finding out that his number one priority is getting the bag.
With Le'Veon, though, like when he was there, he wasn't bad to deal with.
Yeah, you've dealt with him, yeah.
For a star, for someone as good as he was always open to doing an interview. He'd give you time, he'd talk to you, as opposed to AB, who it's like pulling teeth to even get an answer out of him on a Friday. But that was kind of the surprising thing for me, but now we're finding out more about him, I feel like, as a person.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think AB was hard to get.
Selfishness,
Antonio Brown was tougher to get quotes, and absolutely, I think he was tougher to deal with in terms of the media than Le'Veon Bell was. But we're finding out that Le'Veon Bell's number one priority, even above winning, is he wants the bag. Yeah. He wants the bag, and they didn't give him enough of the bag.
And
so
I feel like he's and he's just young, kind of, and he's so focused on this rap career, and he's just not good. Honestly, and I feel like he's gonna.
This is the rap analysis portion here of Steelers Monday.
I feel like he's gonna look back on this at 33. Like, how old is he now? 26.
Yeah, 27. Yeah.
He's gonna look back at when he's in his early mid-30s and be like, damn, I shouldn't
I'm sure
fun, hey, I'm all for doing what you want to do and everything, but just take a step back. I think I don't know. He's a little too prioritized on it.
He's young, I hear you, and there's so many athletes. Deion Sanders, a lot of those.
When I'm 35, I'm going to look back at things I did when I was young and why did I do that, that's where I see. I think he's a little too caught up in wanting to be a rapper.
Yeah, and there were so many. He's a SoundCloud rapper. He hasn't dropped any albums that I've seen the last 2 weeks, so he's been in Miami a nightclub. Did he drop one?
I don't know. I'm out of the game.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That's a nice breather. When I was able to unfollow Martavis Bryant after this past season, that was enjoyable because covering the Steelers last year was just following Martavis Bryant on Instagram. Yeah, the unfollow of Le'Veon Bell will be nice at some point. And one difference we didn't see, I don't know about communication. Tomlin says there hasn't been any between him and the Steelers, but I didn't see any subtle jabs or emojis from him on Twitter after this loss that we did see after the tie, where he would tweet, I didn't know there were ties, or the little chronicle eye emoji. Right. Didn't catch any of that this week. Maybe I missed it, but that's the only difference that I don't know. Maybe if somebody told him, hey, you're going to come back at some point, we don't really like that, or I don't know what went on there, but we didn't see there wasn't much criticism levied from him this week.
I wonder how
he left them alone.
I wonder how much it's weighing on his conscience.
Yeah,
really, at this point where he sees, the Steelers lose and now they're 1-1,
and not much from the running game this week.
Yeah,
unlike week one,
and they don't. And he's watching guys that he is really close with kind of struggle, and it's like, all right, when are you going to come back?
Yeah,
and I wonder. It's interesting to think about how he's feeling right now.
Yeah, and
he's like, nope, I'm going to make a lot of money in a year from in 10 months from now. And it's all going to, or whenever he does sign.
And somebody's going to pay him. Yeah. Somebody's going to pay him, even if he dragged to week 11. Somebody's going to pay him.
Some irrelevant team that needs a lot of that.
Yeah, they have the money. There's going to be some team, the Jets or somebody's going to throw cash at him, and he's not going to win as much anywhere else. He'll probably get the bag, and then his career, based on how these things usually go, won't be as successful somewhere else, but he'll have all the money that he wants. So that's at least kind of where the goal is in mind right now. And fortunately for him, as we are sitting up here atop of Market Square in an undisclosed location here, Pittsburgh Sports Live Studios, our next door neighbor is actually a therapist. Maybe Le'Veon Bell's in there with him when I'm not here. Yeah. Maybe he's going to speak to him about what's getting on with his psyche in terms of actually hurting the team right now. But they have yet to pick up a win without Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell was missed, but wasn't as missed as mightily in week one because of what Connor did. Certainly missed in week two. Remains to be seen how much he'll be missed in week three, but he's the best they have, and he's one of the best in football, and he's not there, so it's always going to be a story as long as Le'Veon Bell's not there, and then it'll be a story when he finally does get there. Chris, quickly, thanks for joining me. Do you have a prediction for Monday Night Football? I mean, it's getting to be now a must-win, Steelers-Buccaneers.
Yeah, I'm on the Tampa train. I think I really like what I've seen. I don't see the Steelers pulling this one out. I think Fitzmagic is just going to keep going, building on this. He's got some weapons, Mike Evans.
Fitzmagic, to say the least here.
Jackson,
NFL's Conor McGregor.
Yeah, and I love the
What's his next look going to be in the press conference? Monday Night Football look? I feel like that should have been
that guy went to Harvard too, right?
Right, yeah.
It's hilarious. Hey, I'm all for it. Yeah, so I don't see the Steelers pulling it out.
Yeah, I saw a colleague of mine threw up there on Twitter that went viral, actually, a picture of him in Harvard, picture here looking like the NFL's Conor McGregor with, that was the baby face, that was the Harvard quarterback, and this is the one they told you not to worry about.
For sure.
Yeah, Steelers lose 42-37, 0-1-1. So it's not 0-2, but it almost might as well be. Week 1 felt like a loss. Week 2 was a loss. They lose to the Kansas City Chiefs 42-37 and head to Monday Night Football against the NFL's Conor McGregor, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Jackson, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Chris Mueller, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, formerly of the Beaver County Times, covered the Pittsburgh Steelers there. Going to make sure to keep us locked here with everything we're offering here at Pittsburgh Sports Live. There is us on YouTube, Pittsburgh Sports Live there on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Pittsburgh Sports Live. Follow myself at Mike Asti 11. Chris, what are you on Twitter?
At by Chris Mueller.
At by Chris Mueller. For him on Twitter. Check out all our shows as well. Check out our website. You can find this content on our website, PittsburghSportsLive.com, as well as what we have offering on PittsburghSportsNow.com, PittsburghHockeyNow.com, Pittsburgh Soccer Now. Check out our shows, our lineup throughout the week as well. The Dan Kongursky Show. Myself hosting Mic Drop here, and Alan Saunders Football Friday. Mike Vakova came with his show, usually dropping on Thursday. We got a full slate lineup for us, and the Steelers continuously provide us a lot to talk about here and a lot of drama. So it's another week, another dramatic week around Pittsburgh Steelers country. And that was Chris. I'm Mike Asti, and this was Steelers Monday on Pittsburgh Sports Live.